I stood in Bryce's office, trying to process his words. Pack your things. Your position has been eliminated. The termination hit me like a physical shock, though I'd been expecting it for days. 1 week after Verity's funeral, and here I was, being fired. The timing wasn't coincidental. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, despite the storm raging inside. I understand. We'll need all client information transferred immediately, he continued, sliding a folder across his desk, especially any contacts you've been handling directly. I nodded, accepting the folder without opening it. Of course. And, he added, leaning forward with poorly concealed urgency, we'll need details about the West Coast accounts. Verity mentioned them before her. Unfortunate passing. That's when I knew. They had no idea she'd officially transferred the entire 1.2 million portfolio to me 3 days before her heart attack. No idea I'd already quietly resigned via certified mail that morning. I'll gather everything, I promised with a pleasant smile. Bryce seemed almost disappointed by my calm reaction. He'd expected tears, perhaps begging. Instead, he got professionalism that clearly unsettled him. You have until the end of the day, he said, dismissing me with a wave. I walked out of his office, past curious stares of colleagues who'd clearly been speculating about my closed-door meeting. Some looked away quickly, guilty about already knowing my fate. Others watched with barely concealed satisfaction. One less competitor on the corporate ladder. At my desk, I began methodically packing my few personal items into a small cardboard box the HR department had already provided. How considerate of them to have it ready. Nell from accounting approached, her voice lowered. Is it true? They're letting you go? Apparently my position has been eliminated, I replied, carefully wrapping the small crystal paperweight Verity had given me for my 3-year anniversary with the company. That's ridiculous. You brought in that huge Coastal Solutions account just last month. I shrugged. Business decisions rarely make sense from the outside. What I didn't say. This was exactly what Verity had predicted. Exactly what we had planned for. 6 months earlier, Verity had called me into her office late one evening. Everyone else had gone home, leaving the floor quiet except for the distant hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum. Kenna, she said as I entered, close the door. I did as instructed, settling into the chair across from her desk. Verity pushed aside her computer monitor and slid a glass of water toward me. I've been watching you outperform everyone for 3 years, she said, her direct gaze as intense as ever. Yet they keep passing you over for promotion. I sipped the water silently. 5 years at the company, and despite bringing in more new business than anyone, I remained stuck while less qualified men climbed upward. The executive team has a particular vision, she continued, choosing her words carefully. And apparently, we don't fit it. What she didn't say, but we both understood. The all-male leadership team maintained their positions through an intricate network of favoritism. My boss had hit the glass ceiling so hard, she'd stopped trying to break through. I'm dying, she stated flatly. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I nearly choked on my water, setting the glass down with a shaking hand. When I'm gone, they'll carve up my client relationships like vultures. Unless, she outlined her plan, she would gradually introduce me to her most valuable clients, the West Coast portfolio worth $1.2 million in annual contracts. But officially, these meetings would appear as routine support work. They're watching the big accounts, she explained, not the scattered smaller ones that collectively matter most. For months, we worked together in plain sight. I met with creative entrepreneurs, boutique manufacturers, and innovative startups all along the coast. Verity introduced me as her right hand. The clients trusted her judgment. Meanwhile, at the office, the whispers began. Spending an awful lot of time with Verity, one colleague remarked loudly as I passed the break room. Probably fishing for that promotion, another responded with a snort. My immediate supervisor, Bryce, began requesting unusual reports, asking pointed questions about client meetings. I provided just enough information to satisfy without revealing our true activities. 2 weeks before she died, Verity finalized the paperwork. Legal transfer of client relationships, properly notarized. She even paid the transfer fees from her personal account. They'll come for you after I'm gone, she warned. Be ready. The day she died, I cried genuine tears. She'd become more than a mentor, but beneath my grief, her plan was already in motion. At her funeral, the executive team performed their sorrow beautifully. Bryce placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch uncomfortable and unwelcome. "Such a loss," he said. "We'll need to discuss transitioning her accounts soon." I nodded, eyes downcast. Whatever the company needs. That evening, I received a text from the CEO. "Meeting tomorrow. Bring complete client list." I stayed up all night preparing 2 sets of documents. One included every client except those in the West Coast portfolio. The other was my resignation letter, effective immediately. With 2 weeks' notice, I wouldn't be required to work. The CEO glanced at my incomplete list during our morning meeting. "Where are the West Coast accounts?" "I'm not familiar with those," I said, expression neutral. "She handled them personally." His face tightened. "Search her files. We need those clients." For a week, I pretended to search while secretly meeting with my inherited clients. Every evening, Bryce would demand updates. Every morning, I'd report finding nothing. The company grew desperate. The quarterly projections looked bleak without those accounts. The executive team huddled in closed-door meetings. Then came my termination. Bryce barely contained his satisfaction, assuming I'd be devastated. Now, as I placed the last of my belongings in the box, Nell touched my arm. "What will you do now?" I smiled. "I have some ideas. If you're enjoying this story so far and want to know what happens next, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I promise Kenna's journey is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment with what you think she should do after being fired like this. My name is Kenna Ellis, and until today, I was a senior account manager at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Not the most glamorous title, but I made it work. I'm 32, single by choice, and determined in ways that often made my colleagues uncomfortable. Growing up in a small coastal town taught me patience. Watching my mother run a small shop while raising 2 kids alone taught me resourcefulness. 4 years at State College on scholarships taught me perseverance. And 5 years at this company taught me that playing by the rules was a luxury reserved for those who made them. Verity recognized that in me from the beginning. While other executives saw a quiet worker who followed directions, she saw the calculations behind my eyes. The first time she called me into her office, I thought I was being reprimanded. Instead, she asked what I thought about a proposal the team had celebrated that morning. "It's fundamentally flawed," I said, surprised by my own honesty. Instead of being offended, she smiled. "Explain." I outlined 3 critical weaknesses in the proposal that everyone else had missed. When I finished, she nodded once. "Tomorrow you'll join me in the client meeting. Say exactly what you just told me. But no buts. The client deserves honest expertise. That's what we're paid for." The next day, the client thanked us for our candor and signed a larger contract than originally proposed, specifically requesting that I be involved in implementation. That was the beginning of our working relationship. Verity became my mentor, though neither of us ever used that term. She pushed me, challenged me, and trusted me with increasingly important responsibilities. When I generated a 30% increase in my portfolio's revenue while others struggled to maintain their numbers, I expected recognition. Instead, Bryce was promoted to team lead, despite his mediocre performance. "You have to play their game," a female colleague advised. "Laugh at their jokes, join their happy hours, make them comfortable." I tried, briefly. Spent evenings nursing drinks I didn't want, listening to stories that weren't funny, pretending to be interested in golf tournaments I couldn't care less about. It made no difference. When the next promotion went to Quinn, who'd been with the company half as long as me, Verity called me into her office again. "Stop trying to be one of them," she said. "They've already decided who you are." "Which is a threat," I laughed. "I'm not threatening anyone. You outperform them consistently without playing their games. That's the most threatening thing you could do." She was right, of course. My results spoke for themselves, but numbers couldn't overcome the invisible barriers. I watched as male colleagues took credit for my ideas in meetings, interrupting me only to restate exactly what I'd just said to nods of approval. I endured clients addressing questions to junior male colleagues instead of me, despite my seniority. And through it all, I kept breaking records, bringing in business, making the company money they happily accepted while denying me advancement. Verity understood. As the only female executive, she'd fought the same battles for decades. She'd reached a level of success that demanded respect, but never acceptance. I watched her navigate board meetings where her suggestions were ignored until a male colleague repeated them. I saw her excluded from golf outings where real decisions were made. "Don't make my mistakes," she told me once. I waited for them to recognize my value. Don't wait. But I wasn't sure what the alternative was until the day she told me about her diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months at best. She'd kept it secret from everyone except her doctor and now me. "Why tell me?" I asked, still processing the shock. "Because I need your help," she replied, "and because you deserve better than what they'll give you when I'm gone." Her plan was both simple and daring. The West Coast portfolio consisted of 23 clients she'd personally cultivated over 15 years. Small to mid-sized businesses that collectively generated $1.2 million in annual revenue. Not the flashiest accounts that executives bragged about at quarterly meetings, but steady, loyal clients who valued personal attention. "These relationships are built on trust," she explained. "When I'm gone, the company will distribute them among the team leads who have no relationship with these clients. Half will leave within a year." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "I want you to inherit them." The next day began our careful choreography. Verity started introducing me to these clients as her trusted associate. We traveled to meetings together, her teaching me each client's history, preferences, and pain points. To the company, it looked like she was finally delegating some of her workload due to health issues she'd vaguely mentioned. In reality, she was transferring her most valuable asset to me: client trust. Zara, from the boutique tech startup, immediately liked me. "Verity never brings anyone to our meetings. You must be special." "Kenna sees things others miss," Verity said simply. Mateo, whose sustainable packaging company was growing rapidly, was more direct. "Are you taking over for Verity?" "Just supporting for now," I replied, following our agreed script. "Good. I hate repeating myself to new people." By the 3rd month, I knew every client's business almost as well as Verity did. By the 4th month, some were calling me directly instead of her. By the 5th month, we were ready for the legal part. "Everything must be documented properly," Verity insisted. "They'll fight you otherwise." We met with her personal attorney, not the company's legal team. Papers were drawn up, signatures notarized, client permissions obtained. One by one, the accounts were officially transferred to me as the primary contact. The company remained oblivious, focused on larger accounts and quarterly projections. When Verity began coming to the office less frequently, citing medical appointments, no one questioned my increased client meetings. They assumed I was covering temporarily. Only Bryce seemed suspicious, demanding increasingly detailed reports. "The executive team needs visibility into these accounts," he insisted. I provided surface-level information, nothing that revealed the depth of my new relationships with these clients. Verity had warned me about him specifically. "Bryce has been trying to get his hands on my portfolio for years," she'd said. "He knows those clients represent security, stability." 2 weeks before her death, Verity invited me to her home. I'd never been there before and was surprised by its modest size and practical furnishings. No extravagance despite her executive salary. "I live within my means," she explained, noticing my expression. "Financial independence gives you options. Remember that." On her dining table lay the final documents: official transfer of client relationships to me personally, not to the company, all properly executed. "Is this even legal?" I asked, stunned by the comprehensiveness of the paperwork. "Completely. I'm transferring relationships I built, not company property. The distinction matters." She slid the papers toward me. "Keep these somewhere safe, away from your home and office." I arranged for a safety deposit box that afternoon. "They'll come for you after I'm gone," she warned, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "Be ready." 3 days later, her assistant called me in tears. Verity had suffered a heart attack in her sleep. She was gone. The company's response was swift: a tasteful email announcement. a donation to cancer research in her name, a team meeting where the CEO spoke about her contributions before quickly pivoting to moving forward and maintaining client relationships during this transition. At her funeral, I stood apart from my colleagues, watching their performance of grief. The CEO gave a polished eulogy that somehow managed to make Verity's achievements sound like they belonged to the company. Bryce approached me afterward, his expression sympathetic while his eyes remained cold. "Such a loss," he said. "We'll need to discuss transitioning her accounts soon." I nodded, eyes downcast. Whatever the company needs. That evening came the CEO's text, demanding the complete client list. The next morning, I provided the incomplete version, omitting all 23 West Coast clients. "Where are the West Coast accounts?" he demanded, frowning at the list. "I'm not familiar with those," I lied smoothly. "She handled them personally." His face tightened. "Search her files. We need those clients." For the next week, I performed a thorough search of Verity's office, finding nothing because there was nothing to find. She'd been methodical in removing any trace of these particular client relationships. Meanwhile, I used my lunch breaks and evenings to meet with my new clients, reassuring them during this transition. Every single one expressed sadness at Verity's passing. Most added how relieved they were to still have me. "Continuity is everything in business," Matteo said during our coffee meeting. "If they'd assigned someone new, I would have walked." Each day, Bryce grew more agitated. The quarterly forecast looked increasingly concerning without those accounts. The executive team held closed-door meetings that ended with grim expressions and hushed conversations that stopped when I walked by. Then came my termination meeting, the culmination of their frustration and my preparation. As I carried my box of belongings toward the elevator, Bryce approached one last time. "Before you go," he said, voice low and urgent, "where are those West Coast files? This isn't personal, it's business. The company needs those accounts." I set down my box and looked him directly in the eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play games, Kenna. Those clients represent over $1 million in annual revenue. They belong to this company." I picked up my box again. "Actually, they belong to whoever they choose to work with." His face reddened. "Is that a threat?" "Just a fact," I replied, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed on his angry face, I allowed myself a small smile. The termination I'd been expecting had finally arrived. But unlike what Bryce and the executive team believed, this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The morning after my termination, I awoke before my alarm. The strange silence of not having to rush to the office settled around me like an unfamiliar blanket. For the first time in 5 years, I was unemployed. Technically. In reality, I was freer than I'd been in years. I made coffee and carried it to my small balcony, watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed with concerned messages from the few colleagues I'd been friendly with. Nell had sent 3 texts already, each more worried than the last. I answered her briefly. "I'm fine. Better than fine." The truth was, I'd been preparing for this day for months. The night before Verity's funeral, I'd opened a business checking account. 2 days later, I'd filed the paperwork for my new limited liability company. 3 weeks after that, I'd secured a small office space in a converted warehouse by the waterfront, walking distance from 5 of my new clients. All of this had been done quietly, methodically, following Verity's detailed instructions. "Don't rush," she'd advised. "Let them show their true colors first." And they had spectacularly. My phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Kenna Ellis speaking. "Ms. Ellis, this is Gavin Stewart, Chief Legal Counsel for—" "I know who you are, Gavin," I interrupted. We'd met at several company functions, though he'd never remembered my name. "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "There seems to be some confusion regarding certain client relationships formerly managed by Verity Winters. The company would like to schedule a meeting to clarify these matters." "There's no confusion on my part," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Perhaps I'm not being clear. These client relationships belong to the company. Any attempt to redirect them would constitute theft of proprietary business assets. I'd been expecting this. Verity had prepared me for it. I have no intention of discussing this further without my attorney present," I said calmly. Any additional communication should be directed to her office. I provided the contact information for Lorelei Chan, the lawyer Verity had introduced me to. This could be resolved amicably, Gavin said, his tone shifting to something almost friendly. The company is prepared to offer you a consulting arrangement to facilitate the transition of these accounts. Goodbye, Gavin. I ended the call and blocked the number. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. The CEO himself this time. I let it go to voicemail. His message was terse. Kenna, this is a serious matter. Call me immediately. Instead, I sent a text to Mateo. Still on for our 10 a.m. meeting? His reply came seconds later. Absolutely. Bringing the new product samples. I showered and dressed with care, choosing a sleek charcoal pantsuit that Verity had once admired. Power isn't about blending in, she'd told me. It's about standing your ground. The temporary office I'd leased wasn't fully furnished yet. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a small conference table. But the view of the harbor made up for the Spartan interior. Mateo arrived precisely at 10, carrying a box of prototype packaging. Nice place, he said, glancing around. Bit empty, though. For now, I replied. I'm starting small. Mateo set his samples on the conference table. Got a call from your old company this morning. Some guy named Bryce? My pulse quickened. What did he want? To schedule an urgent meeting about our account. Said there'd been a restructuring and he'd be taking over. Mateo shrugged. I told him we're happy with our current arrangement. And what did he say to that? He said there must be some misunderstanding. That all client contracts are with the company, not individual representatives. Mateo laughed. I told him to check his paperwork again. I smiled, feeling a wave of validation. And did he? Must have. He got very quiet, then said he'd have to get back to me. Mateo opened his sample box. Enough about that. Let me show you what we've been working on. By noon, I'd confirmed meetings with 5 more clients for the following day. By 3, I'd received emails from 7 others, all reporting similar calls from either Bryce or another executive at my former company. At 4, Lorelei called. They're threatening legal action, she said without preamble, claiming breach of contract, client poaching, and misappropriation of trade secrets. Exactly as Verity predicted, I replied. Yes, and exactly as we prepared for. I've reviewed all the documentation again. The client transfers were executed properly, with full disclosure to and consent from each client. You never signed a non-compete clause, and there are no trade secrets involved since all client information was either publicly available or provided directly by the clients themselves. So, we're on solid ground? Absolutely. But they don't know that yet. They're bluffing, hoping you'll panic. What's our next move? Let them bluster. I've requested all relevant documentation from their legal team. That will buy us some time while they scramble to find paperwork that doesn't exist. After hanging up, I crossed to the window, watching boats navigate the harbor. Verity had loved this view. When we'd looked at this office space together, just weeks before her death, she'd stood in this exact spot. Remember, Kenna, she'd said, when they realize what's happening, they'll try to intimidate you first. When that fails, they'll try to buy you. And when that fails, she'd turn to me, her face gaunt, but her eyes still fierce. That's when they'll show you exactly who they are. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Kenna, it's Quinn. Can we talk? Not company business. Just talk. Quinn, the one who'd gotten the promotion I deserved. We'd never been close, but he'd always been less overtly political than the others. Still, I hesitated before replying. When and where? His response came quickly. Tonight? That cafe near your old apartment? I frowned. How did he know where I used to live? I'd moved 6 months ago and had never mentioned my new address at work. The Copper Kettle at 7, I replied, naming a cafe in a busy shopping district instead. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the back exit. Quinn walked in at exactly 7, scanning the room until he spotted me. He looked tired, the usual confidence in his stride missing. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the chair opposite mine. What's this about, Quinn? He ordered coffee before speaking again. Things are crazy at the office. The executive team is in complete meltdown mode, and that concerns me how? They're saying you stole clients, that you and Verity conspired to defraud the company. He leaned forward. They're building a case against you. There is no case. They've pulled 5 years of emails, looking for evidence. They're interviewing everyone who worked with you, asking if you ever discussed taking clients. I kept my expression neutral. Again, why should I care? Quinn sighed. Look, I know we weren't friends, but what they're doing, it's not right. They're trying to destroy you professionally. Why are you telling me this? He stared into his coffee for a long moment. Because Verity once did something similar for me, warned me when they were setting me up to fail. This was unexpected. Quinn had always seemed like one of them. Ambitious, political, willing to play the game. I owe her, he continued. And by extension, you. What exactly are they planning? They're contacting every client, claiming you misrepresented your authority to transfer the accounts. They're offering steep discounts to maintain relationships. And they're preparing to send cease and desist letters to all 23 businesses. I nodded slowly. Anything else? They've frozen Verity's final compensation package, claiming evidence of misconduct. They're using it as leverage with her family. This sent a surge of anger through me. Verity's sister had 2 children in college. That money was meant for them. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Quinn hesitated. There's one more thing. They've offered me a bonus, a significant one, to provide evidence against you. And will you? There isn't any evidence to provide. He stood to leave. I never saw this meeting happening. Neither did you. After he left, I sat alone, processing this new information. They were more desperate than I'd anticipated. Targeting Verity's family crossed a line I hadn't expected even them to cross. I called Lorelei again. They're freezing Verity's final compensation, I said when she answered. I just heard from her sister's attorney, Lorelei confirmed. They're claiming evidence of breach of fiduciary duty. Can they do that? They can try. It won't hold up, but it could tie up the funds for months. That's exactly what they want. Her sister needs that money now. I know, I'm working on it. I ended the call and headed home, my mind racing. This wasn't just about me anymore. They were punishing Verity's family to get to me. The knowledge sat like a stone in my stomach. The next morning, I received an email from the CEO himself, requesting a private meeting to resolve our differences amicably. I forwarded it to Lorelei without responding. Her reply was swift. They're getting desperate. The legal threats aren't working, so now they're trying diplomacy. Stick to the plan. The plan. Verity's plan, now mine. A careful sequence of events designed to give me maximum leverage when the time came. We were still in the early stages, but already the company was reacting exactly as she'd predicted. By the end of the week, all 23 clients had confirmed they were staying with me. My phone had been blocked from receiving calls from the company's main numbers, and Lorelei was handling all legal communication. The initial panic had faded, replaced by a steady determination. I spent my days meeting with clients, setting up proper workspace, and establishing the foundation of my new business. Evenings were devoted to strategic planning. I slept better than I had in years. Then came the first real complication. Zara called on Friday afternoon, her voice tight with stress. Kenna, we have a situation. Your former employer is telling our investors that our contract transfer was illegitimate. They're claiming it could invalidate our entire financing round. My grip on the phone tightened. That's completely false. I know that, but our lead investor is spooked. They're talking about pulling out unless this gets resolved. Zara's startup had just secured crucial second-round funding. Losing that would be devastating. Give me your investor's contact information, I said. I'll have Lorelei reach out directly. There's more, Zara continued. They've offered to cut our service fees by 40% if we come back. That's hard to ignore in our position. This was the first crack in the wall. If Zara went back, others might follow. I understand, I said carefully. That's a significant discount. But we don't want to leave you, she added quickly. You and Verity have been there from the beginning. We trust you. Let me see what I can do, I promised. After hanging up, I paced my small office. This was an escalation I hadn't fully prepared for. They were targeting the most vulnerable clients first, the startups with investor pressure and tight budgets. I called Lorelei again, explaining the situation. They're playing hardball, she agreed. But so can we. How? I can't match a 40% discount. I don't have the resources they do. No, but you have something they don't. I could hear the smile in her voice. You have Verity's contingency plan, I think. The next morning, I invited Zara to my office. When she arrived, Lorelei was already there, along with a man I'd never met, tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone used to being in charge. Zara, this is Ambrose Tanner, I said, Verity's former mentor and the founder of her first investment group. Zara's eyes widened. Ambrose Tanner was something of a legend in startup circles, an early investor in dozens of now successful companies. Miss Daswani, he said, extending his hand. Verity spoke highly of your innovation. Mr. Tanner, she stammered. I had no idea you were involved with Kenna's company. I wasn't, until yesterday, he replied, glancing at me. But Verity asked me to keep an eye on certain situations that might arise after her passing. Your current predicament qualifies. For the next hour, Ambrose outlined a potential partnership that would not only resolve Zara's immediate investor concerns, but potentially accelerate her company's growth timeline. By the time she left, the crisis had transformed into an opportunity. Thank you, I said to Ambrose after Zara had gone. Verity never mentioned she'd spoken to you about this. Verity kept many cards close to her chest, he replied. She contacted me shortly before her death, explained what she was planning for you, and asked if I'd be willing to step in if certain situations arose. And you agreed? Just like that? Ambrose's expression softened. Verity saved my company 20 years ago when everyone else had written me off. I owed her. Besides, he added with a small smile, I've been watching those executives mismanage talent for years. It's about time someone taught them a lesson. Over the next 2 weeks, similar scenarios played out with other vulnerable clients. When my former company targeted them with aggressive discounts or investor pressure, I found ways to strengthen those relationships rather than simply trying to maintain them. For Wade's custom furniture business, I connected him with 3 new retail partners. For Lark's organic skincare line, I arranged a feature in a major lifestyle publication. Each solution was tailored specifically to the client's needs, demonstrating a level of personal attention my former company couldn't match. The executive team's tactics grew increasingly desperate. They attempted to contact my clients outside of business hours. They spread rumors about my company's financial stability. They even sent a junior account manager to stand outside my office building, intercepting clients as they arrived for meetings. Through it all, I maintained the calm demeanor Verity had modeled. Never let them see you sweat, she'd advised. The moment you react emotionally, they believe they've won. 3 weeks after my termination, I received another email from the CEO, marked urgent and confidential. This has gone far enough. It read, we're prepared to offer you a partnership position with full executive privileges if you return the West Coast accounts to company management. This offer expires in 48 hours. I forwarded it to Lorelei with a single question. Time? Her response was equally brief. Almost. That evening, I spread all my documentation across my dining table: client contracts, transfer agreements, email correspondences, meeting notes, everything meticulously organized and preserved. 5 months of careful preparation leading to this moment. My phone rang. Bryce's number. I answered out of curiosity. The CEO's offer is genuine, he said without greeting. Full partnership, corner office, executive compensation package. Sounds generous, I replied. It's more than generous, it's unprecedented. And what would my role be in this partnership? He hesitated. Strategic client management, meaning I'd bring back the West Coast accounts but wouldn't actually manage them. Details would be negotiated, of course. Of course, I echoed. And you? What's your role in this arrangement? Another hesitation. I've been asked to facilitate the transition, meaning you've been told to get me to agree at any cost, because the quarterly numbers are due next week, and the executive team is panicking. The silence confirmed my assessment. The offer expires tomorrow, he finally said. I suggest you consider it carefully. I always do. After hanging up, I sent a message to Lorelei. They've offered partnership. Getting desperate. Her reply came immediately. Perfect. Exactly on schedule. Meet tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything. The next morning, I arrived at Lorelai's office carrying a briefcase full of documents. She was waiting with a colleague I hadn't met before, a serious-looking woman introduced simply as Diane from the Financial Crimes Unit. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. This was the moment Verity had been building toward all along. Not just a plan for me to take clients and start my own business, but something much bigger. Ms. Ellis, Diane said, I understand you have information regarding potential financial irregularities at your former company. I looked at Lorelai, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I replied, opening my briefcase. I believe I do. The documents I placed on the table represented only a fraction of what Verity had compiled over 15 years. Evidence of systematic financial manipulation that went far beyond simple accounting tricks. Creative revenue recognition, hidden expenses, artificially inflated client contracts, a pattern of deception designed to boost executive bonuses while misleading shareholders. Verity discovered these discrepancies 3 years ago, I explained. She began documenting everything, building a case methodically. Why didn't she report it immediately? Diane asked. She tried, internally first, following proper channels. When that failed, she approached a board member, confidentially. 2 weeks later, her department's budget was cut by 30%, and 3 of her staff were let go. Diane examined the documents carefully. And she shared all this with you? Not until she knew she was dying. She needed someone to continue what she'd started. The client transfers, Lorelai added. They weren't just about helping Kenna start her own business. They were about protecting these clients from what's coming. And what exactly is coming? Diane asked. I pulled out the final document, a detailed analysis showing the company had been systematically overcharging clients while under-delivering services, using complex contract language to disguise the practice. When this becomes public, I said quietly, the company's reputation will be destroyed. Verity wanted her clients protected before that happened. Diane gathered the documents carefully. This will take time to verify. Of course, I agreed. Verity understood that too. That's why she was so methodical in her documentation. As Diane left with the evidence, Lorelai turned to me with an approving nod. You've done exactly what Verity hoped you would. Maintained your composure, followed the plan, and delivered the final piece exactly when needed. So what happens now? I asked. Now we wait, but not for long. I left Lorelai's office feeling lighter somehow, as if a weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. The last piece of Verity's plan was in motion. All those months of careful preparation had led to this moment. My phone buzzed with a text from the CEO. Offer expires at 5 p.m. today. Last chance. I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I headed to my office by the water, where 3 client meetings were scheduled for the afternoon. Life would go on, business would continue, regardless of what happened next. As I unlocked the office door, my phone rang again. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was someone else from the company making a last-ditch effort. But something made me accept the call. Kenna Ellis speaking. Ms. Ellis. The voice was unfamiliar, authoritative. This is Detective Reeves with the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to schedule a formal interview regarding the documentation you provided this morning. I closed my eyes, a mix of emotions washing over me. Of course, whatever you need. And Ms. Ellis, you might want to turn on the financial news. I hung up, my fingers trembling slightly as I pulled up the financial news on my tablet. The headline instantly made my breath catch. Breaking. Securities investigation launched against major consulting firm amid fraud allegations. The accompanying article mentioned whistleblower documentation and systematic financial irregularities. The company's stock had already dropped 8% in pre-market trading. My phone immediately began buzzing with notifications. Clients texting to confirm their meetings were still on, Nell asking if I'd seen the news, and a final message from the CEO. What have you done? I set the tablet down and took a deep breath. This was the culmination of Verity's plan. Not just client transfers and my new business, but justice. The kind that couldn't be negotiated away or buried under legal threats. As the morning progressed, the news grew more detailed. Trading of the company's stock was temporarily halted after it plunged 20%, Financial analysts were dissecting the allegations. Former clients were being interviewed about their experiences. By noon, the first executives were being photographed leaving the building with security escorts. By 2, the board had announced an emergency meeting. By 4, Bryce and 3 others had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Through it all, I conducted my client meetings as scheduled, though everyone wanted to discuss the breaking news. "Did you know?" Mateo asked during our afternoon conference call. "Let's focus on your upcoming product launch," I replied, neither confirming nor denying. That evening, Lorelei called. "The SEC has requested formal interviews with 17 current and former employees. Your name is at the top of the list." I assumed it would be. "They've also frozen all executive bonuses and compensation packages from the past 3 years." I thought of Verity's sister and her college-aged children. What about posthumous benefits? Will Verity's family still get frozen out? Actually, no. I've already confirmed her final compensation package is being processed separately due to special circumstances. Apparently, no one wants to appear to be punishing a deceased whistleblower's family right now. I smiled, feeling a weight lift. Good. That's what matters most. "There's something else," Lorelei added. "They found Verity's original report from 3 years ago. The one that was supposedly lost when she first tried to report the irregularities internally. It was buried in a restricted executive file server. So they knew, all along, every single one of them. The entire executive team was complicit." I thanked Lorelei and ended the call, walking to the window of my apartment to watch the city lights come on as dusk settled. Everything was unfolding exactly as Verity had planned. The company that had systematically marginalized us both was now facing the consequences of its actions. My phone buzzed with yet another message. "Quinn, this time. They're looking for scapegoats. Bryce is claiming you and Verity fabricated everything." I wasn't surprised. Let him. The documentation speaks for itself. I've been asked to provide a statement about your work practices. And will you? I'll tell the truth. That you were the most ethical person in that building. I set my phone down, oddly touched by his loyalty. Perhaps not everyone from my old life was an enemy after all. The next morning, Detective Reeves arrived at my office for our formal interview. For 3 hours, I walked her through every document, every discrepancy, every attempt Verity had made to address the issues through proper channels. "She kept meticulous records," Reeves observed, studying a particularly detailed spreadsheet comparing reported client billings to actual services rendered. "Verity believed in accountability," I replied. "She used to say that integrity isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when you think no one is." After Reeves left, I sat alone in my office, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Verity should have been here to see this. She'd orchestrated everything so perfectly, yet wouldn't witness the results of her planning. My phone rang. An unfamiliar number with the area code from Verity's hometown. "Kenna? This is Iris, Verity's sister." My heart quickened. "Iris, yes, how are you?" "I just received notification that Verity's benefits are being released. All of them." The company's legal team suddenly became very cooperative. "I'm glad to hear that." "There's something else." Her voice softened. "Verity left a letter for you with my attorney. He was instructed to deliver it 1 month after everything happened. Would you like me to mail it? Or I can come to you," I said quickly, "if that's all right." 2 days later, I sat in Iris's modest living room, holding an envelope with my name written in Verity's distinctive handwriting. Iris had given me privacy, stepping outside to tend her garden. The letter was dated 1 week before Verity died. "Kenna, if you're reading this, then everything has proceeded according to plan. The company is facing investigation, the clients are safe with you, and my family's financial security is preserved. What you don't yet know is why I chose you. It wasn't just your competence or your integrity, though both are remarkable. It was because 3 years ago, when I first discovered the financial irregularities, you were the only person who noticed something was wrong. With the company, yes, but more importantly, with me. You asked if I was okay when no one else saw past my carefully maintained facade. You offered help without knowing what you were offering to help with. In that moment, I knew you were different. The company will try to paint me as vindictive, a disgruntled employee orchestrating their downfall from beyond the grave. Perhaps there's some truth in that. But my real motivation was justice. For myself, for you, for every person whose career was stifled because they wouldn't play by corrupted rules. The portfolio I left you isn't just clients, it's opportunity. Build something better than what we came from. Create the company we always deserved to work for. There's one final thing. In the safety deposit box where you kept our documentation, you'll find a key to a storage unit. Inside is everything you'll need to fully understand the depth of what we've uncovered. Use it wisely. With respect and confidence, Verity. I folded the letter carefully, tears blurring my vision. Even now, months after her death, Verity was still guiding me, still offering wisdom from beyond. The next morning, I visited the storage unit. Inside was a single filing cabinet containing detailed dossiers on every executive at the company, their financial dealings, their decision histories, their vulnerabilities, information gathered meticulously over 15 years. Among these was a separate folder labeled Board Connections, documentation of how each board member had been selected not for their oversight capabilities, but for their willingness to look the other way. Copies of emails, meeting recordings, evidence so comprehensive it took my breath away. I immediately called Lorelei and Detective Reeves. This wasn't just about financial irregularities anymore. This was systematic corruption at every level. Within days, the investigation expanded. The board chairman resigned. 3 additional executives were placed on leave. The company's stock continued its downward spiral. Through it all, my business grew steadily. The clients who had trusted Verity, and now trusted me, remained loyal. Word spread about a new consulting firm that prioritized ethical practices and client success above all else. 6 months after my termination, I leased a larger office space in the same waterfront building. My team had grown to include 5 full-time employees, including Nell, who had resigned from our former company the day after the investigation became public. On the morning we moved into the new space, a package arrived. A framed photograph of Verity standing on the beach near her hometown, looking out at the horizon with characteristic determination. A note from Iris accompanied it. She'd want this in your new office. I hung it in the reception area, directly across from the entrance where every visitor would see it. Beneath it, I placed a small plaque with the words that had guided me through the past year. Success isn't climbing their ladder, it's building your own. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor, Quinn, looking uncomfortable in the unfamiliar surroundings. Nice place, he said, glancing around. Very different from the old office. That's the point, I replied. What brings you here? I've been offered a position at what's left of the company. There were structuring after the investigation. Congratulations? He shook his head. I turned it down. It doesn't feel right, being rewarded for surviving the purge when I was part of the system that enabled everything. I studied him, seeing genuine regret in his expression. So what will you do? I don't know. Start over somewhere. Try to do better. I considered him for a long moment. We have an opening, junior position, less money than you're used to, but it's honest work. His surprise was evident. You'd hire me? After everything? Verity believed in second chances. And you did warn me when you didn't have to. The following week, our team gathered for the official opening of the expanded office. Clients, friends, even some former colleagues who had reached out after leaving the old company. Iris came with her children, visibly moved by the photograph of her sister, prominently displayed. As I looked around at what we had built, not just a business, but a community founded on the principles Verity had valued, I felt her presence as strongly as if she were standing beside me. The investigation continued to unfold, revealing deeper layers of misconduct than even Verity had documented. The company that had once seemed invincible was fighting for survival, its reputation in tatters, its leadership disbanded. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My focus was on building something new, something better, not revenge for its own sake, but justice that created opportunity for growth. In the end, the most powerful revenge wasn't destroying what had hurt us. It was creating something so much better that the comparison itself became a judgment. Verity had known that all along, and now, so did I. If you've made it to the end of this story, I hope it resonated with you in some way. Maybe you've faced similar challenges in your career, or perhaps you've witnessed the kind of systematic problems Kenna and Verity confronted. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up against workplace injustice? Or have you been lucky enough to have a mentor like Verity in your professional life? Your experiences matter, and sharing them helps build the kind of supportive community we all deserve. Thanks for listening.